Hello, today I'm joined by my guest Nina Dayal. She is the Senior Compliance Advisor from Legal Eye. Nina, how are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. Very, very grateful to be here. Thank you ever so
It's
much for the opportunity.
it's good to have you here. It's good to have you here. We're going to be discussing a topic which I think we all know is important, and we all know it's something that we should be doing. But like so many things that kind of confuse us or scare us by the scale of what may happen if you don't deal with it, there is this weird sort of almost cognitive dissonance out there where people bury their head in the sand and don't deal with it until they need to, and that is anti-money laundering and the repercussions, perhaps, about not being on top of it. So, I guess my first question to you is, I mean, we see the headlines in the industry press every now and again. So, a couple of mornings a week, there'll be such and such an agent has been fined this and this amount for not doing that, and so we know it's more prevalent. We know that people are looking out for it. So what are the risks, and what's the scale of the issue?
Okay, well, okay, so AML globally, it's so important that practices and businesses have their procedures in place because it's estimated globally it's costing the industry 1.7 billion, a trillion, sorry, not even billion, trillion pounds. So, and that equates around 2 to 5% of the global GDP. Significant sums. So, UK businesses are losing billions as a result of money laundering. And as a quote from Nick Sharp, who's the HMRC Deputy Director of Economic Crime and Fraud Investigation Services, he made it very clear it's not a victimless crime. It involves serious and organised crime, and all businesses within scope of the money laundering regulations must comply in order to combat money laundering. There have been significant fines in the last couple of years. HMRC are very carefully policing that. We saw some of those high profile businesses being fined, such as Pebble Bricks being issued with fine just over £250,000, and then we had Countrywide, I think it was around 215,000. So it is significant. Practices must have those processes in place. Those fines equating to probably about, with HMRC at the moment, around the 3.2 million part. That's over 240 businesses have been fined in the latest round of those being identified, and including with those listed about 100 estate agent businesses as well on that list. So it's really important that businesses are aware of what policies, procedures, and practices they must embed, because critically, this will not only affect your reputational damage, it could lead to your practice being closed down.
Yeah.
And it's important
And
to have
this
adopt
isn't
those practices.
this isn't just a passing fad by the HMRC. This is here to stay. If anything,
Absolutely.
will get more stringent rather than be relaxed. So, in that respect, what are it? I know we're talking in general terms, but what are the general requirements for an estate agent?
Okay. Well, you're absolutely right, David, to mention that, because it's not going away. The HMRC, amongst other agencies, they are working together in order to tackle economic crime, and they're driving out those non-compliant businesses who are breaching the regulations. So, what are the requirements according to the regulations? And I'm not going to go into quoting specifics of the regulations, but if you are a business that provides estate agent business, you must ensure that you register, first of all, with the HMRC for AML purposes, and renew that registration every year. And on top of that, you must ensure that you have compliant practices in place. It is a criminal offence to actually trade as an estate agency business without first being registered. And in addition, firms that do not register and those that do not review or pay the correct fee face significant ramifications. They could have their registration terminated, leaving them unable to continue to trade lawfully. So really significant risks if you fail to register. And if you look at the list actually that has been published, you will see that a number of businesses have failed to actually register.
Yeah, it's like I said, we spoke off camera that you never normally get estate agents coming forward early on in the game going, we know we need to comply, let's get our house in order. And the type of people that you normally would end up helping very often are people that are reacting to perhaps something negative that's happened. So, you know, the HMRC are onto them, that they've had an audit or whatever may be, and they're trying to tidy up the house after that has happened. It's far easier to sort of get on top of it at the beginning. And is it as painful as people think it's going to be?
No, I mean, there are stumbling blocks, and I guess that's because there's so many other legal obligations and pressures that estate agent businesses are facing, and it can be extremely overwhelming and challenging at times. But ultimately, it's a matter of breaking that fear and demystifying that process ultimately, gaining a good compliance culture and seeking support where you can find it. It is ultimately the first step in ensuring that you've got the appropriate procedures in place. Historically, estate agents businesses are reluctant to complete what they call completing the due diligence procedures. That is actually a vital requirement as part of those processes with regards to combating money laundering. So with estate agents, they must ensure that they are completing, for instance, that first compliance, completing client due diligence when they're entering into a business relationship. And that often happens when you're, I guess, the first point of the business relationship is when that seller accepts the purchaser's offer. So it's important that those procedures are in place and those checks have been completed.
So typically speaking, and I know we probably haven't got time to go into total detail because there are so many different variations when it comes to breaches, but typically when there are breaches, even accidental breaches, where are they coming about?
They could be a manner of ways that breaches are coming out, but mainly we're looking at a lack of policies and procedures, a lack of controls, failing to complete that due diligence, timing of identification and verification, if you do complete those, lack of training, and number one, businesses failing to have what is a requirement by the regulations to have a business-wide risk assessment in place. So those are those significant breaches.
And so when you talk about training staff, obviously, yeah, it seems absolutely logical that we should want to train our teams to know what they're dealing with. But there's also a requirement really to train staff in that respect. How often do you need to sort of be seen to be doing that? What is good and what is recommended and what's excellent?
Yeah, well, okay. So any training and where you're ensuring that your staff are keeping an awareness of money laundering issues is absolutely vital. The regulations provide that you give regular training to all relevant staff just to ensure that they are aware of the relevant money laundering offences, what they may look like, how to make a report, what are the concerns, the red flag triggers and the warning signs. So it must be on a regular basis. You must be keeping afresh of all of those updates. And there have been significant updates to the regulations, which practices and businesses must keep up to date. And that training is the first step in terms of ensuring that you have and develop the right compliance culture. That's vital for businesses.
So in terms of, I mean, there are updates to the legislation all the time, and you know, the basics are there. We know what we have to do, but the ways in which we can do it change. I think it's fair to say that the tools at the disposal of estate agents nowadays for carrying out AML checks are just so much better than when we started out five,
Absolutely.
6 years ago, when we were still photocopying bits of paper and we didn't know what we were doing. Nowadays, we've got much better digital channels to sort of make that customer onboarding experience as well less, less like border control, but more like you're welcoming a client as well, and it seems like it's routine. So for estate agents, what guidance is there available to them to make sure that they, dovetail this into their onboarding process?
Good question, David. And actually, the HMRC have produced some excellent guidance, and it's detailed guidance which you can find on the government website. It's a 100-page document. You should be looking into the guidance just to give you an understanding of what the HMRC are setting in terms of their expectations that businesses must be complying with when it comes to the regulations. So critical areas that are covered within the guidance include responsibilities of the senior management when it comes to AML and their oversight, responsibilities in relation to suspicious activity reporting, ensuring that businesses have the necessary risk assessment and policies and controls in place, ensuring that record keeping, you're keeping those documents of those due diligence. Again, mentioning staff training, ensuring staff are keeping continually aware of those updates and the changes in the legislation and regulations, and importantly, the risk of non-compliance for estate agencies.
So, I mean, I don't suppose there's a way that we can keep the wolf from the door by telling the wolf that we're doing a great job behind this door, so don't come looking. But it would be useful, I presume, for a business to demonstrate some sort of commitment to AML compliance up front, so that really they are saying to the public and also to the HMRC, look, we're a business that's trying to do everything that we can to remain compliant. Are there ways in which we can demonstrate that commitment on a sort of day-to-day basis?
Absolutely. I think the first thing is really making sure that AML actually is a key priority for your business. So, for instance, carrying out an AML review against the HMRC's guidance, reviewing those policies, making sure that they are up to date, and all those actions and requirements are actually being completed. This requires digging deep into your policies, your procedures, and your controls, and keeping a check on a regular basis. Certainly an annual review is required when you are completing those checks. So a focus and highlight and ensuring that AML is a key priority.
Because it does take a little bit of understanding, because from what I've understood and what I've learned, one of the things the HMRC are looking for is that you don't just apply a one size fits all criteria to all your customers. Because you might say, okay, well, look, I'm going to do the top level of AML searches and compliance that I possibly can on every single client, and that will get me through. But in actual fact, the HMRC want you and your teams to demonstrate that you're capable of spotting the differences and the different requirements for different types of client that you may be dealing with. So there are nuances to this as well, isn't there?
Absolutely, David. It has to be appropriate to your business, and hence the reason for businesses to ensure that they have a bespoke, developed, business-wide risk assessment, which sets out all of the business risks and the mitigating factors, and looking at your clientele and your customer base, and what procedures do you have in place in order to deal with those specific risks.
So if you were to leave, I mean, this has been absolutely fascinating, and I would encourage anybody who's struggling with this to reach out and have a proper chat with Legal Eye, because I think there's a lot that you can do to support agents through this. And I know that you spend most of your day dealing with both solicitors and agents that want to do this correctly. I need a bit of guidance through it. But if you could leave us with perhaps a top 5 things that we could action today, that we could start to sort of work into our processes, what would they be?
That's a really good question. I guess if those five takeaways for me, I think the most important, get to know the money laundering regulations. That's absolutely vital. Then read that guidance that's been provided, a really nice detailed guidance. It's 100 pages, dip in and out, but ultimately have a review against the guidance set out. What are those requirements? I mentioned earlier, understand your business risk. Ensure that you've developed a risk assessment which sets out what those risks are and what those mitigating factors, and making sure that your policies, your procedures are in order. Are they up to date? Do your staff understand where they are? Do they understand how to spot red flags, warning signs, and critically, how to report a suspicious activity report to your nominated money laundering reporting officer? And I guess finally, it's just understanding the consequences of non-compliance and that potential criminal liability and offences as well. So seek help where you can. We are here to help. Speak to your specialist compliance advisors. At Legal Eye, we can assess the compliance of your firm's policies and procedures against those HMRC standards, and we can identify very quickly what you need to in order to identify those training needs, and ultimately address any deficiencies and put right and help you strengthen your business against money laundering and risks and threats.
Nina, thank you so much for providing a bit of light and guidance through something which I think confuses a lot of us because of the technicalities. But you've given a very comprehensive overview. So thank you very much for giving us your time.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you ever so much, David.
Thank you.